Hello all you spacefaring cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Stars in Shadow, a new indie 4X space strategy game developed by Ashtar Games and published by Iceberg Interactive. So at its core, Stars in Shadow is a 4X space strategy game with turn-based combat to boot. It's a game that we don't really see that much of anymore. We don't really see indie 4X strategy games of any kind of quality. You tend to only have the AAA or at least middleware games with a decent budget attempting to create space 4X strategies. Now, Stars in Shadow is a game that has been, like I said, on early access for quite some time. I previewed it with the early access version. I really enjoyed what I saw, and the final version of the game has only been improved even further. So before you start off your adventure to dominate the galaxy with your various faction, you have to choose a faction. Now, there are several playable factions in the game comprising of 6 alien races. What I like about the factions in Stars in Shadow is the fact that each faction plays and feels very differently, not only from an aesthetical point of view, but each faction has its own faction specific mechanics or skills or abilities depending on who you choose. It has their own research technologies, their starting locations, their starting technologies, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses depending on who they are. So for example, I like to play as the Ashtar Imperials, who have access as their factional ability to a Stargate, and a Stargate can essentially, once you've researched the technology and know how to use it, it can fly your ships off to any part of the galaxy. Now obviously you have to go the long way around to get home, but it's really good for setting up outposts fairly early to mid game and just really expanding quite quickly. And there's things throughout the factions and all the different factions that have really interesting things. One of the factions has the ability to hire mercenaries, so you can essentially have an army comprised of mercenary ships from each faction, so you get the bonuses of each different ship class in each faction, which is a lot of fun. The core gameplay itself works very similar to most 4X space strategy games, in the sense that you start off on a starting planet. You are able to build things on that planet, such as factories or research facilities to help your technological research rate, farms for food for your population, and then from there you build ships, colony ships, and you expand your empire as thus. As you expand the galaxy and explore the galaxy with your various scout vessels, you'll come across not only the other factions but other native alien races to various planets, and you can use them to your advantage. One of the things I like about this game is the fact that, for example, I found a race on a planet called the Tinkerers, which were a mechanical race who were really good at skilled labor and able to do a variety of things. So if I colonized that planet, then the Tinkerer population would become part of my empire and I could gain their bonuses. And it's something that is in a lot of 4X space strategy games, but once again, it's nice to have it in this indie one because it's a lot of fun, and a lot of the alien races that you meet are fun. There's a lot of humor embedded in the various alien races descriptions, and there's a lot of humor embedded in the game itself, and I quite like that about it. But like I say, the core gameplay of the game is very much a traditional 4X strategy, and in fact this probably reminds me most of things like Masters of Orion 2 in the way that it's designed, in the way that it's set up, in the way that the combat is. So let's talk a little bit about the combat before we talk about the rest of the game. The combat is turn-based, and essentially you go in on a 2D platform and you're able to move your ships and then attack various vessels, and obviously you've got to take into account factors like range, various weaponry, various shields, and you're able to battle like that. You can also auto battle if you so desire. I really enjoyed the turn-based combat. It's something that I really like in my 4X strategy games. There are 4X strategy games out there, like for example Endless Space 2, that just do like the cinematic AI controlled battles that really, while they look impressive, there's never it's not engaging in any way for me. And I love the fact that Stars in Shadow included a turn-based system that I can really get my hands on, really test myself on my tactical prowess, and of course ultimately I am the deciding factor if I win or lose the battle. Outside of combat, you have everything that you would come to expect from a 4X strategy. So you have a pretty varied technological tree. You have multiple technologies to research, which will grant you access to multiple different things, such as new ships, new weapons, new shields, new technology, and of course bonuses to things like farm production, factory production, all that kind of thing. You have diplomacy in there, which is a fairly straightforward diplomacy system. You gain contact, people will come to you, ask you for favors such as materials or currency, and you can choose to whether to accept or not, which will grant you relationship bonuses. You also come across native inhabitants that are outposts rather than just natives, so that they are pretty sentient, they have their own space technology, and you have to negotiate, and if you gain enough favor with them, they can become part of your empire and grant you an extra colony. So the diplomacy system is fairly straightforward. It's nothing that you haven't seen before in other 4X strategy games, but it is something that's nice to have in there, and it's fairly well executed for the most part. Now, during the early access period, there were a couple of features missing, such as the ability to retrofit your ships with new technology. You had to do that manually in early access, and a lot of that has now been fixed, which is something nice, and it obviously means that the developers taken on the feedback received by the community during the early access phase. Now, you're also, speaking of retrofitting ships, you can create your own ship designs depending on the use of the hull, and you can outfit it the way you want. You can completely customize any of your ships, which is a really nice feature to have in there, because there are some even 4X strategy games that have big budgets that don't allow ship design, and thankfully Stars in Shadow does allow that, which improves customization of the game. Now, speaking of customization, something that I was disappointed with was the fact that I wasn't able to create my own unique race. Now, while the factions given are pretty extensive and they are a lot of fun and unique, I always like in my 4X strategy games to create my own race. You can't beat the cosmic sovereignty, who has a divine mandate to destroy and exterminate everything in the galaxy. Sadly, that isn't the case in Stars in Shadow, and while the races are all well and they're varied and unique, I have to say that the ability to create your own race is something that I really do like in there, and I do feel that holds the game back somewhat. I have to say though, overall, Stars in Shadow is a very impressive indie 4X space strategy game. Considering that it's developed by a very small team, they have created something that is very charming, very unique, which is completely reinforced by the visuals and sound. The sound is it does its job. It's a nice ambient soundtrack, very galactic in that sense, but the visuals really stand out for me. They're very unique, they're very vivid, they're very distinctive, and they really add a nice sense of charm and also humor to the overall game, because like I said, there is humor very much imbued in the game's written part, and so it's really nice for that to be backed up by the visuals as well. I have to say that as indie 4X strategy goes, this is probably one of the best ones I have seen to date. The early access period was fun enough, and the fact that the developers really did take on board the feedback by the community is a testament to them. But the fact that the final version is so good, the early access version was so good, it's polished, it's clean. There are a couple of issues in there. I still think that there are UI issues that I mentioned in the preview. I still think that it doesn't do a good job with the tutorial at all, and there really does need to be a better tutorial put in there. And the fact that a lot of the icons are far too small, and it's difficult, especially for someone who's never played a 4X strategy before. If they came into this game, they would have a tough time figuring out how to get from menu to menu, and I still think that does need to be improved. That being said, however, I have to say I was really impressed with this game. It is a fantastic indie 4X strategy game that has absolutely tons of content. I really like the fact that they didn't feature creep here, because there is very much a tendency in the genre to just keep adding and adding and adding, and the game would never be finished. They didn't. They stuck to their core focus. They really centered around the idea of what they wanted to do, and they executed it very, very well. And it's certainly a game that I recommend to pretty much anyone who's interested in playing a 4X strategy. And that is my review of Stars in Shadow. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are on the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, make sure to subscribe and share the video on your social media. And as always, I will see you next time.